On the path to embodying more power, we encounter challenges and resistance. It is often our inner challenges and the resistance that arises from within our own being that are the greatest tests we'll face. Those are usually served up by our ego, which I like to think of as the part of ourselves that believes that we are separate and either better or worse than others. Oftentimes, that better or worse is actually occurring together. We often think we are simultaneously better and worse, but one of them will be in the foreground and the other will be in the background. In this light, we can see the connection story that humanity is playing out as a larger human experience in encountering our ego. Are we separate and better or worse, or are we actually connected? The ego shows up in many forms, and it's important as we gain greater sensing in our inner subtle literacy to be able to identify the different patterns. There are many systems for categorizing inner shadows or ego archetypes. And there's a simple one from Jose Luis Stevens that I like and I happen to use. Here are the 7 types that he describes, and he calls them your 7 dragons. There's arrogance, self-deprecation, self-destruction, impatience, greed, martyrdom, and stubbornness. We can have these not as just 1 or 2, but they can exist in percentages of expression in our inner being that change through time. And in my experience, the architecture of our ego is informed very deeply by the hurts that we've experienced, oftentimes in childhood. It's a part of ourselves that steps forward like an inner warrior to protect our little child and says, we're never going to be hurt again. We're going to be really strong and I'm not going to budge, says the stubborn dragon. Or, you think you're better than me? I'm the best in the room. I'm the best. I'm the winner, says the arrogance dragon. Or, God, we have to get out of here. Like, this place is terrible. We gotta go, says the impatience dragon. Or for the one who has the hurt of not having enough, we experience, I need everything. I have to have it all. I have to talk the whole time. You have to look at me. I need to eat all the things, says the greed dragon, because it wants to be nourished and wants enoughness. So we're each going to explore the constellation of our 7 dragons, because the more that we track the makeup of our ego patterns, the less we'll be hijacked by them. We don't necessarily want them driving the bus because they reinforce the separation and better or worseness. Their belief operating systems aren't necessarily in service of the whole, because the whole design of the ego is to serve the self. And it's important, as we encounter them, to not just understand what are the tracks and the signs on our inner landscape of each of the 7 dragons, but there are general tracks and signs that we'll see. In general, the ego reveals itself through being controlling, hierarchical, and as a result, adversarial, divisive, fear-based, and it tells a lot of stories. And oftentimes you'll find that the ego doesn't want to be present with feeling. That's where all the story comes from. It's like, well, maybe we'll look over here, we'll look in the past, or we'll look in the future, and I'll keep talking, says our inner monologue, instead of being with a discomfort. We don't actually want to be with how fear feels in our body. But when we tap into our sensing, that actually gives us presence and a way to find the antidotes. As we're going in to learning about our ego architecture, here's how I want to suggest you relate to your own ego. but you come with curiosity. And you come to try to understand, how does it move, and what is it doing, and when does it show up, and what are the situations where like it just comes flying to the front of the stage. The second is I invite you to not be adversarial with it. If you try to banish it or tell it to F off or want to put it in a box and shoot it to the moon or wherever, you're still committing hurtful action toward yourself, because our ultimate aim is to recognize that this dimension of our own being is like a built-in design to have a lifetime greatest teacher walking with us. How helpful. Already in the system. Oh, good. Thank you for showing me where I get prickly, or small, or obnoxious, or where I cut myself off at the knees. It's like all the keys are revealed in its patterns. So instead, if we can be loving and we can incorporate it, that's the ultimate goal. So it's like getting very patient with things that can be very triggering. And then we're not in a fight, because it's not a fight. It's just learning. And when we can do that with ourselves, wow, we can do that with other people. And that is a huge access point to power. Lastly, it's so interesting to notice that our essence and our true inner power, unlike the ego, never assert themselves. They don't come flying in with weapons or banging drums saying, "Look at me, this is what you have to do." They often sit patiently in our inner reality and speak in a measured, quiet voice. I'm here. I'm here when you want to look at me. I'm here when you want to embody your courage. I'm here when you want to give your gift, when you want to tell the truth, when you want to show that person how much you love them. It's like a very wise old being inside of us that won't bust down the doors and force us to do something. We have to choose it. That's another way to tell the difference between our essence and our ego. By understanding these patterns, we become much more empowered at navigating our inner behavior, our inner understanding, and opening up those gates to that bigger flow in a way that's good for ourselves and for those in our life.